I'm a big hypocrite. Really, I mean it. I mean, one of the things that I always talk about is this idea that if you're going to buy a suit, you need to focus on either navy or gray. That's always what I tell guys they need to start out with. I just picked up my first like solid gray, plain gray suit, probably ever. Yeah, it's kind of crazy. I have 20 suits hanging up in my closet right here, and suits and jackets and whatever, and I just barely finally picked up a solid gray. Big hypocrite, but we all have to live and learn, right? I've been getting a lot of requests from a lot of guys to talk about my suiting, what I do style-wise, what I do as far as my fit. I personally, for a little while, thought, well, it's a bunch of technical stuff. It's not anything that's really going to be interesting. However, I was watching a fitness channel the other day, and I realized that there's a very popular thing that was the fitness world's equivalent of this. It's called If It Fits Your Macros, or Full Day of Eating. And in it, these guys, they just film what they eat all day, and they talk about how it fits within their calorie requirements and their macronutrient requirements. And if you're not into that, it sounds really boring. I personally am into that. I keep track of that stuff, and I find it really interesting to see what these guys who are further along in their fitness process than I am, what they eat, why they eat it, how they make that work, especially when it comes to eating out. Anyway, if that's interesting to me, then I can imagine why this other thing would be interesting to me. I would like to see other YouTubers who do style talk about their fit and their customizations, and I now can understand why that is interesting to you guys. So, we're going to start a new series. We're going to call it Fit Check. I don't have any sort of recurring time frame for it. It's kind of like the Style in Real Life series. I make those when lightning strikes, and when I find a subject worth studying and worth understanding better. Same goes with this. When I get new commissions, which is not on a regular basis, custom stuff or new purchases, especially for non-sponsored content, then I'll break it down and I'll give you guys a little bit of insight into that. So, today, we're going to go through my brand new 3-piece gray sharkskin suit. Let's do this. Let's start off with the vest. This is the most basic, and it also has the least amount of customization. So, really simple. It is a single-breasted. It has 6 buttons on it. Now, as far as what we do, it can range anywhere from 4 to 8. I like to keep it a little bit simple at 6, especially because with the button stance, which is basically where it is in relationship to the shoulders, I like to drop that a little bit more so that I get more of the V, a little bit more shirt, and a little bit more tie showing. And so by going with fewer than 8, but still 6, I just end up liking the way that looks. I did a notch lapel on it. That harkens back to a British tradition, and I find myself embracing that more and more, especially as I've found through doing one of those DNA tests that I'm like 33% British as far as my heritage goes. And so I find that to be something that I want to embrace a little bit more. We did a 3-pocket configuration. I like that because it matches the asymmetry of a jacket where you've got 1 breast and then 2 hip. I have some guys who like to do nothing on the breast and just 2 on the hip, or other guys who like to do all 4. And the other thing is with the back here. I did it with the same cloth as the lining as opposed to making the back the same cloth as the rest of the suit. Reason behind that, again, is because it's a little bit more of that British tradition. It makes it evoke a little bit more of that refined archetype, which is definitely where I find myself falling. And I also don't mind having a little bit of contrast to it. Simple navy, tons of colors to choose from, and I've done some bolder stuff in the past, but I like the simplicity of the navy because the goal for this for me was to maximize versatility. All right, let's move on up to the jacket. Really pretty simple here too. In fact, I think this is the most simple of any jacket I've ever done. Single-breasted, 2-button configuration. We did a notch lapel, and yeah, you can certainly do a notch lapel even on a finer cloth like a sharkskin. The lapel's a little bit wider, and yeah, I understand that that's not something that's going to be super timeless. Lapel width fluctuates probably more consistently than anything else, but I also know that this isn't going to be the last plain gray suit I'm going to make for myself, and so I was okay embracing a little bit of the current aspect of going extra wide on the lapels, especially because what I really like about it is how high the gorge is. So the gorge is this part right here, basically where the lapel meets the collar, and the higher up it is on your shoulders, then the more visual weight it puts up on your shoulders, and so it gives more of this masculine V shape that most guys are after. Simple pocket configuration, no ticket pocket, no patches, just did a 2 flapped pockets and they're flat. We're not doing the hacking pocket where it's cut at an angle. And then a standard for us with B&R is to do what's called a barchetta pocket, where it curves up along the chest, and that's because it's designed to actually follow the natural lines of your chest and make it look a little bit more streamlined. We also have this little flower loop in here, and that way if I want to wear a lapel, because this is actually a functioning buttonhole, then I can wear that if I want to. Speaking of functioning buttonholes, I always opt for functioning buttonholes. This one is a little bit different than what I've done in the past, because this is actually, let's get that focused. There we go. Normally I only do 4, but on this one I did 5. There is a 5th one that's hidden under here. I just like to leave that bottom one open. For guys who know what to look for, it's kind of one of those subtle indicators of quality. Buttons, these are horn button, and they're kind of a mix between a mottled black and gray. And the advantage to these is that they allow, again, for me to maximize versatility. I can wear black shoes, brown shoes, light brown shoes, oxblood, pretty much anything I want leather-wise with this. Makes it a lot easier on me. And then as far as the inside and the construction goes, this is a fully canvas garment, so there's no fusing to it. And then on top of that, I tend to run a little bit hot in my suit, so I just did it half lined. So you've got lining up here along the front panels, across the back of the shoulders, and the lining covers up all these areas up here where the actual canvas is, but then the back is totally open and exposed. It maximizes airflow, it improves breathability, which means it wears a whole lot cooler. Stuck with the same navy lining that I did on the vest, however, I've done this kind of cool paisley for the piping that runs along all of these edges wherever there's trim. And that's just because I think it's a little bit visually interesting, and I don't really care if it gets a little bit louder in a jacket on the inside, because nobody's going to see the inside if you want unless you want them to. I did a light shoulder pad. Typically, if I'm doing something that's a sport coat, then I'll do it completely unstructured. I really like the way that a soft shoulder falls, especially once you get into like the Spalla Camicia, like the really soft Italian stuff. However, with my suits, these that are intended to be a little bit more formal, I like a little bit of construction in there, so I went with a light pad. And last but not least, the trousers. Pretty basic here. What I typically opt to do, especially again with my stuff that's a little bit nicer and intended more for suiting, is you'll notice there are no belt loops. I don't need a belt. This stuff is custom. It's designed to fit me. However, we do have these side adjusters, and the reason for that is because my weight fluctuates about 10 pounds between the summer and the winter, and so I do like to have some control over it. I also like the aesthetic of wearing suspenders, and so I have these brace buttons in here. You don't feel these, and then nobody sees them, so it doesn't matter if you decide not to wear braces, but if you do decide that you want to throw on a pair of suspenders, then it can clean up the look quite a bit. Always go with this flapped watch pocket, and then what I've done with these is I've got a single outward facing pleat. Yes, that is a pleat, and pleats are coming back. One thing that I've seen a lot of, and I really enjoy the aesthetic of, is guys are making stuff that's cut a little bit fuller, and we'll talk about that as we actually do the fit check on it as opposed to just the customizations. But by embracing the drape and the flow of the cloth, the pleat actually allows for that, especially if you wear them traditionally where they should be, which is up closer to your navel, up and over the hips instead of below your hips like a pair of jeans. And so that's what can make a pleat look really good, as opposed to what you're probably thinking in your head, which is your dad's Dockers from 1994. And no, pleat doesn't look like that. And then I also really like deep, unapologetic cuffs. This guy measures in at 5 centimeters, which I believe is right around 2 inches. I love a deep cuff. I love that it adds some visual weight down around the ankles, and it's just a personal preference on it. So let's start off with the trousers. Overall, I'm really happy with the fit of these, and I've made some changes compared to what I've been wearing in the past. In fact, I actually sized up an entire size, and that was more because of the way that it fit through the circumference of the seat and the thighs. No, I'm not a huge gym rat. No, I don't put up a ton of weight, but I have been putting on some size, which means that I had to go up. In fact, you'll notice that the waist is actually a little bit big, but again, that was very intentional. I'm at kind of a lower weight this summer. Maybe that'll stay the same. I'm hoping that'll stay the same, but I may end up putting on some more this winter. I know my weight tends to fluctuate, and so you'll notice that it'll slide up and down, but I can just control for that with these side adjusters here. Really, really clean drape all the way throughout the legs. I love that the cuffs help weigh it down and give it some weight at the bottom. It's a little bit unfamiliar for me to have my stuff fit this loosely, and it's funny because as I look at this, I realize it's not super loose, but it is looser than what I'm used to, so just a little bit of that unfamiliarity. Changes that I'll make in the future, really subtle. The first one is that I will go a little bit longer in the outseam. I really like this shorter length with my stuff that's skinnier, but when it's a fuller cut like this, I think that it's just a little bit too short and they end up looking like floods. So I think I'll probably go 1.5 centimeters, maybe 2 centimeters longer. And the other thing is here with the rear rise, I can feel this up a little bit tighter than what I actually want it to be, especially because I've been experimenting with going higher on the rise and wearing this up above my hips. And so I just need to increase that rear rise a little bit so it looks a little bit cleaner and it feels a little bit more comfortable. As far as the vest goes, really, really hard to screw these up, especially at this point because I've done enough of these that I've been able to dial in a few things like the fact that my right shoulder drops more than my left. Big keys to look for are you want to make sure that it is long enough that it actually covers the waistband of your trousers, but you don't want it to be so long that it actually starts to make the transition over your hips. So you want it to sit right in the sweet spot between those two. That way your shirt stays covered, but it doesn't look like it's trying to be a jacket. It definitely knows that it wants to be a vest or a waistcoat. For the circumference, I love how clean this is. It's not super tight. In fact, with this belt in the back, this is something that you want to look for. I don't think I've ever seen a vest without it, but you want to make sure that you have it. It's not something that is an indicator of it being a cheap make, because contrary to popular belief, your vest shouldn't always be so tight that it sits really clean and it can even limit your motion. Because if you think about it, you're standing up, you're sitting down, you're driving, you're moving, and if it's too tight that it limits your range of motion, that doesn't do you any good. However, there are times when you definitely want it to be tighter, and so what you can do is cinch up the belt, and then it gives you that cleaner presentation for when you need it. So the belt is very much on purpose. It's not something that makes it look cheap. Embrace that aspect of it. And then finally moving on to the jacket. I am thrilled with how this jacket has turned out. I've made a lot of changes to my jackets over the years. I've gone up in sizes. I've suppressed the waist. I've opened up the waist. I've had to mess with shoulders. I've messed with sleeve length. I am absolutely thrilled with the way that this thing has turned out. If you notice, there's no crumpling on my right shoulder. And again, if you look at it, my right shoulder drops more than my left. I broke that collarbone, and so that's something that I have to factor in. I feel like I finally got my sleeve length to be right where I wanted. It shows just a hint of cuff, enough to make it look like I'm doing this on purpose. Good suppression through the waist and through the hips. It follows those natural lines. It doesn't flare out, but it's not so skinny that I start to get any pressure on it. And I feel like the length, especially because I'm way more legs than torso, the length of this jacket is exactly what it needs to be. So all in all, really, really incredibly pleased with this fit. The only thing that I may end up changing is I may increase the waist just a tiny bit, maybe the seat a little bit as well. If you'll notice from looking at the profile, the vents start to open up just a tiny bit, but this is getting super nitpicky and just something to factor in on future purchases, but by no means something to make me unhappy or dissatisfied with the way that this thing has turned out. All right, guys, hope you find that helpful. If you would like to see an actual breakdown of everything, then I will have a link for you here. It's just basically at the main site. I'll give you a breakdown of all the different design options. And if you do find this useful, if this is something that you think is interesting, leave me a thumbs up and leave me a comment. Let me know what you like about it. If you want more detail or if you want something a little bit different, let me know what else you'd like to see. And I will catch you guys next time.